Well, this is an interview with Jeanie Treichel on February 11th, 2026 at the Computer History Museum. Jeanie, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.
Could you tell us when and where you were born?
Yes, I was born May 23rd, 1931 in South San Francisco, California.
And a native Californian. So could you tell us a little bit about your family and your family background?
So it was, during the Depression, so I was born in a house, not in a hospital. So always have been very conscious about the Depression. My family is Italian. My father was born in a little town near Pisa called Ponsacco. And he came here when he was about 5. But his father and mother had been in Italy. And then on my mother's side, she was born in California, but her mother was born in Lucca. So the whole family was from Tuscany. So we feel very proud of being from Tuscany. My dad was very proud. That's the main part of our family, very Italian. And when I was born in South San Francisco, everybody was Italian. That was before World War II. So it felt it was just all was Italian family, friends, and the other people we used to see a lot were some Puerto Ricans and Filipinos. But basically, I felt I was raised Italian. Everyone spoke Italian.
Oh, really?
Yes.
In the household.
And when we also never ever felt or even had any thought that you felt poor. We didn't know, for example, that there was Atherton, and everybody was in South San Francisco. When you had a party, it was held in somebody's basement. It was very, very friendly, very, very great.
What was your father's occupation?
He was working. Well, what happened with him is you feel you're really like an immigrant. What happened to him is when his father came here with his mother and father, and he had. Actually, they had about 4 children at the time, and they had later. But as soon as they arrived, after a year or two, my grandfather, whom I never met, died in probably one of the very first car accidents in the country. He was on the back of a truck coming back from a hunting trip. So my father only got to go to school until 8th grade, there were 5 boys and 1 girl in the family. And he didn't receive his first check from his mother until he was 35, because he was supporting. And but during his life, so he was very conscious of having to just work. He worked at the Edwards Wire Rope Company in South San Francisco. They made the rope for ski lifts and bridges and things like that. And so he was always afraid to leave to get another job, because in those days, he was earning about $1 a day, and if you left your work, you're out of luck maybe of getting another job. So that was his experience. And you were saying about the other side, same thing with the other side. On my mother's side, the husband came, that is my grandfather, whom I never met, and then he brought his wife over later, and they had 3 girls. Same with him, he had to work as a bricklayer, and he died very soon and left her with 3 little girls. And so my mother, who was one of the 3 little girls, just keeps remembering how her mother was always afraid of going to the poorhouse. Everybody worried about going to the poorhouse. And to this day, I've heard myself saying, if you don't pay your bills and everything, you go to the poorhouse. It's funny how these things last with you. Yes. So they had a hard time. But we always had a wonderful life because the family, everyone stuck together, and people were all in about the same boat. So you had parties in your basements. People were about the same with same income, and so when we were raised, our father was a hunter, and we had ducks and geese and pheasants. My father fished at the ocean, and we had bass and abalone, and then we had his own garden. We always had chickens and rabbits, so we ate with food that was cooked with the Italians way, like what people today would call gourmet Italian food. We ate that every day. And so we never felt it was very good. So,
did your mother work outside of the home, or?
Very little, because that was a thing of pride about my father. He didn't want her to do that. She tried to do that at one point. He didn't even want her to go to PTA. And at one point, I think it was, I don't know what year it was. I know I was about 5. So it must have been 36. She decided to work at Swift and Company, and I don't know how he let her do that. Maybe they needed money at the time. I don't know. They never seemed to talk about money very much, except that we didn't want to waste any. So she worked at Swift and Company, I think 1 year, wrapping hams. There was a certain way she had to wrap them. But that was all. As far as I know, that's all she worked. Of course, she worked hard at home, because we lived in South San Francisco, and until the war, just before the war, and we would have probably still been there, except that we lived with my grandmother, who they had with my dad. And the other boys in his family accumulated. They had a little house, and we lived with them. My mother had 2 sisters, and so the day my grandmother died, when I was 10 years old, the 2 sisters showed up and wanted us to sell the house right away. That's the first thing they did the first day. And so I can still see and hear my mother crying. But that's all they wanted to do. So that's why we moved to Redwood City. I see. And my sister is still in Redwood City, and we lived there. And I stayed there also until I was married.
And could you tell us a little bit about your education and your interests as a youth?
Yes.
What sort of a young person were you?
Right. So I was lucky that I always seemed to have a teacher that thought I was special. So I remember my first grade teacher, even my kindergarten teacher. They always let me be the one to hand out the Valentines in the Valentine box, because I could read. And I don't know, when I was 4th grade, another teacher thought I was special, so I got to be in the plays. When I was in high school, I had a wonderful, he was the accounting teacher and very supportive. So in high school, I became the, we called it Commissioner of Finance. I was in charge of I was the treasurer for the high school. I was in charge of the money for the football games and all that. So I kept having these special people that really encouraged me.
Was that the high school in Redwood City?
Sequoia High School. Sequoia Union High School District. And at that time, it was the only one, besides Palo Alto High School and San Mateo. So the Palo Alto district kept themselves pretty unique. They only had people from Palo Alto. And there's a creek that separates Redwood City and Palo Alto. So everybody on the other side of the creek was in the Sequoia district. So that meant Redwood City, San Carlos, Atherton, Menlo Park, unincorporated East Palo Alto, Belmont, all of them. So we had everybody, and they only had Palo Alto. So eventually, all of the newcomers or, people who didn't have the formal training beforehand. So all of the more well-educated people ended up in Palo Alto and Redwood City. We had everybody. I always thought that was unfair. I thought that should have been one whole district. And I know that, so we were the only high schools, from Palo Alto, Redwood City, San Mateo. I thought that was unfair because it should have involved everyone, And one thing I remember, because I was so insulted in the Redwood City Tribune, the newspaper, when the first new high school after Sequoia to be built was going to be built in Atherton. And somebody wrote an editorial to the paper and said, they're building the new school in Atherton, and they don't want any of the Redwood City riffraff there. And that showed you the things people could say in those days. I'll never forget that.
I know it was a big school, but by any chance, did you know Gordon Moore, who later went on to be one of the co-founders of Fairchild Semiconductor and Intel?
Oh,
I think he went to the same high school at the same time.
I don't know what year he graduated. So I graduated.
He was born in 31.
Oh, he was.
Yeah, and I cannot remember the date of his graduation.
I don't remember someone knowing him, but I graduated in 48. Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. Yeah. Anyway, interesting. He also lived in Redwood City.
Well, you're finishing on these special people. Even when I was at, there's others along the way, but at San Jose State, I had to. I paid for my tuition because I always worked from the time I was little, but I became the secretary to the head of the science department, so I worked every day for half a day all through. But she was an incredible, at that time, imagine, woman. She was the chemist and the head of the department, Dr. Gertrude Cavins. And so she was a very special person. So I worked with her quite a lot. And also she was in charge of something called West Coast Nature School that San Jose State was very famous for field work. Okay. They had many of their professors were, that part of their work, whether you were in herpetology or ornithology or whatever, you took everybody on the field all the time. She also invented this West Coast Nature School that every summer took a week and took teachers to the national parks. And every day you did a different subject, trees, animals, this and that. So it was great working with her, but I was very fortunate in my life to have these special people because my family was very nice, but they never tried to, like today, the parents seem to have to get you into everything. Ours was sort of just live and let live kind of thing. So all these things keep coming to me.
So you went to San Jose State for college?
Yes.
And were you commuting from Redwood City or did you live down in San Jose?
Oh, yeah, that's another good part of my life. So anyway, we didn't have a lot of money. I wasn't going to go to college. I could go back and tell you about that. But I did start, and on the first year, I commuted on the train from Redwood City to San Jose. And during that year, I became friends with another person from Redwood City, my high school, and two of the girls from Palo Alto School. We were enemies, but we became friends all year. And at the end of the year, we decided, hey, we don't like this because, you know what, when you got to San Jose, there were all the vagrants and bums. They would follow us to school, and we hated that. There were a lot of these hobos that used to live under the bridges in those days. So we decided we were going to live on campus, but neither of us could afford to live in a dorm or a sorority, and so we decided to rent an apartment. We found one, a brand new one, for $75. It was $125 a month. I think that's what it was. And the problem was the dean wrote letters to our parents and saying, well, they're no longer going to be responsible for us because we're going to be living off-site. But anyway, we got the apartment, and we actually lived together for the rest of college days, 3 years, and we subletted in the summertime. It was really great. We took turns. One day you cooked, one day you shopped, one day you cleaned the house, and one day you were off. Yeah, so we still have, 3 of us are still alive, but the husbands are all gone. The four husbands are gone. So that was a really great experience.
What was your primary interest? What were you studying?
Oh, so the thing was, I wasn't going to school because my family had said, okay, when I was going to go to high school, they wanted me just to take the business course. So that included 4 years of typing and shorthand and business and machines and everything, and no time for any of the college work. And so that's what I was doing. But in my senior year, I was best friends with a person, Beverly Ward was her name, and her family always said that she was going to college. So at the end of the senior year, she said, Jeanie, you should be going to college too. And I said, well, we just didn't plan for that. I probably can't get in. And she said, you better go and try. So it's because of her, that's why I did. And and I had good grades and everything. I was a good student, but I just didn't have the courses. Anyway, they said they would let me go there on probation 1 quarter, and if I did well, I could start and something. That's what I did. And then I decided, oh my goodness, I want to learn everything. So the course, it seemed, where you could learn everything would be a teaching course, because there was art and music and math and everything. So I signed up for the California Teaching Credential course. So that's what I did.
And so as your college education came to a close, what was your next step? What did you do?
Oh, so it all has to do with, well, I was in the teacher's course, you had to take nature study. Everything was called nature study in those days. And that's when I was also working with Dr. Cavins in the department. And I got to know all the professors of all the subjects in nature study and animals and mammals and everything. And I became really interested. But I was already interested in nature because with my dad, we were always at the ocean and outside. In fact, we used to go to San Gregorio Beach before Highway 1, and we would be the only ones there, except maybe a Japanese fisherman. But going back to where were we now? At San Jose State.
At the end of college.
With Dr. Cavins. And we were talking about the school of my interests. Yes. Oh yeah, so because of that, so I had the years of nature study and all that. So after that, I decided to get when I got my teaching credential and the BA degree, I decided to get an MA in natural science. I think I got one of the first ones. They were just starting that. And so I got my MA in that. And even in my senior year, relating to nature study, two of the other men in the nature study program, or you should call it natural science, we started a field school for children. In retrospect, we think it might have been one of the first field schools for children, because not like today, everybody's a naturalist, everybody is taking people on trips. It wasn't happening. So we just put a little ad in the newspaper and said, don't read this. We set up a little program where we would take children every Saturday for 6 Saturdays and then one overnight. And we took them to all the places on the peninsula, to the tide pools and to a place to find snakes, we signed up immediately, like the 35 people. And we rented a bus, and now we had this program, and it was really fun. We did it our whole senior year. And when we graduated, I gave the program to a friend of mine, and she carried on for 3 years. So that was fun. So that was something that you hardly remember till I just met the other person the other day. And I said, oh, she carried it on for 3 years. And so...
And what was your next step after your master's degree?
So after that, that I did, but then I was, when did I start working? As soon as I graduated from San Jose, I started working as a teacher and at San Mateo schools. Okay. And so I would say in my last year, you had to have you had to spend 6 weeks in one class, a lower class, and 6 weeks in an upper class before you graduated. And if I had had the second one first, I probably would have quit. The first one was so wonderful. It was a first grade teacher, and she was so sweet, and the classroom and the children were so great. The classroom was very organized. If the teacher left the room, they all carried on. So she taught them all that they were independent. Everybody's desk was private. And it was just the most wonderful thing. And she taught me many ways, many tricks of how to keep the class like that. And so that was great. But then when I had to have this fourth grade teacher, it was such a disaster. Even when I first went in there, but she hadn't arrived, all the kids were running around, moving desks, because they knew there was somebody, new. And I thought, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can do this. I would cry every night, but I had to get through that. But I really think I would have quit if I hadn't had the first experience, because you didn't get really any training on what do you do to make people mind, Yeah. That was the hard part. So at that time you could, grab them by the arm or yell, but, I didn't have the temperament just didn't have the temperament for that, strength and yelling and stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did. So I just started teaching anyway. I just taught 2 years and then a half year. So I didn't get tenure because on the Easter of the third of the year, I was married. Okay. Yeah. And so I didn't get my tenure. But you didn't care at that time, right? You were going to be married. Yeah. Right.
And your husband also shared your interest in
the
natural world.
Right. So what happened was when I was also a senior, I had also been to camps. And when I was a senior, I worked at the Audubon camp at Sugar Bowl, and this was, and many of the people from San Jose State were working there for the Audubon Society, doing one of these weeks for teachers. And at one point, they had other young people besides me working there, and one of them was a young man that I saw a lot during the summer, during that period. So at one point, he wanted me to meet his family in Wisconsin. And so I went there this Christmas. He wanted me to meet his best friend. So his best friend happened to be the person I married later. So not so lucky for, his name was Gordon. And so we found out that while I was, even before I was teaching and then when I was getting my degrees, I was very active in also the Audubon Society, also the San Mateo Coyote Point Museum. At one point I was teaching about snakes. I can't believe it now. I get so squeamish sometimes. And I also had done the field school for children, so I was very involved in nature. It turned out he also was with in the organizations as I was, Save the Bay and Audubon Society and 3 or 4 other ones. We had many mutual friends, but we had never met. So that's, and his whole background also was, while his father wanted him to be a baseball player and help build houses on weekends with the other firemen, he wanted to study birds, so there was a conflict there. So we both have been, when we we started meeting each other, we didn't go to restaurants and things. We were always just hiking Point Reyes or whenever, just going on hikes all the time. With the bird watching was a lot, just, all that. I used to press flowers a lot. So natural history was a big part of my life, still. Yeah. And still, yeah. That's what we were doing.
So when you left teaching, it was, I guess, just, was it at the end of the 1950s when the two of you went to Africa?
So it was, so I was teaching, so if I graduated in, 52, and then I was teaching 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. So when we got married, we were both 25. It was 55 when we got married. Oh, so that's why we got married in Easter, because I have to tell you before that, if I can get back to this point, so that you know what's going to happen. So what happened was after, was it the Korean War, the first one, when they started to draft men again. Yes. Right, and so now all the men at my husband's age had to think of a way to get out of the Army, right? That's what they were all doing. I'm sorry to say. That was the reality. So I had a cousin who was instantly inducted into the infantry, poor thing. And then I had another cousin who was smarter, and he joined the California Maritime Academy so that he would not only get a degree in engineering, but he became an ensign or a second lieutenant in the Navy. And then my brother, unfortunately, he decided to get out of the Army by marrying. He married his girlfriend who was 15. And so what my husband did is he wanted to enter the Navy, and he was accepted as a second lieutenant. But the week before he was going in, he was sleeping on the ground and contracted Bell's palsy. Your face is twisted. Right. So the Navy rejected him right away. But the Army took him right away, so he had to go into the infantry. So the reason I brought that up is when he went into the infantry, and she was in Washington, D.C., and that's why when he wanted to get married, he had to come home. He could only get a week off, and it was at Easter time. And so then, he came, and then we drove to D.C. And why this was important to tell you is because he was, when we met, he was a student at Berkeley, and he was in his last, I was already graduating, and he thought it was really great because I not only graduated, I had a car and I had binoculars, and he didn't have any money. He was trying to get a little money being a student, not an intern, but a student, where the professors have people that help them. And so he had the famous professor of geography. He was in geography, Dr. Carl Sauer. And he was, he just couldn't stand it that George was called into the infantry because he said he was probably the best student he ever had. That's what we heard. And so what he arranged to have George be transferred to the Pentagon so that he could advise the generals on all the locations and geography. So he was actually lifted from the infantry and went to and he worked in the Pentagon. So that's where we lived in Washington when I got there. We were there the year. So while he was in Washington, that's where all of the headquarters of the wildlife organizations are: National Wildlife, Wilderness, Nature Conservancy, the Wildlife Conservation Society, and so on. They were all there. And he got to know all those people, and he developed the plan to go to Africa. He had always wanted to go there. And in those days, everyone was worried that maybe some of the animals may become extinct because of all the poaching and everything. So he present a proposal to the New York Zoological Society. And it was to go to Africa and survey all of the countries south of the Sahara, like 17 countries, and see what the status was. Did they have any reserved areas? Did they need help against the poaching? Do they need water holes? And what was the ecology? So we were supposed to, after about 14 months, present a book that would be almost a guide to what the situation was in Africa, country by country, and also from an ecological, environmental point of view, a serious book that could have been a guidebook for any conservationist, and also to alert everybody to the problems and get other people to help support Africa. And it was going to be this beautiful book and serious. And as I say, also we already had arranged for this artist to do the first page of every chapter, and that was the plan. And as I say, so from Washington, that's what we had from the leaving New York. That's when we went to Africa on September of '56.
And you were there for a year and a half?
About a year and a half, a little less than a year and a half.
And I know you had just, a very extensive and expansive experience there. You just published recently a whole book about it. I wonder if you could just tell us, really what the most important thing was for you from that whole experience of traveling around Africa.
Well, it was a wonderful experience. It was something, that's why we tell it like a new adventure every day. But it was, actually, we thought we were going to save Africa. We were young and idealistic, and we thought with our trip and telling everybody what it was like, we were going to help save Africa. And so we had made contacts, And George had, of anyone that was already working in African wildlife. And in addition, the directors of all the zoos in Europe have always been extremely active in wildlife conservation. So that's when before we started at Africa, we went to Europe and visited all of those people. So when we started in Africa, we had names of many people to visit. That's one of the most wonderful things I love is now when you're traveling and you know you're going to meet someone, because you're instantly in that environment and with that person. I think that's one of the things that I've always treasured so much. When I go somewhere, I miss that because you go there, you're nowhere. But we were always somewhere, and we met the game warden, or we met a governor general, or we met a district commissioner, or we met anyone who was in any position. And so that was very good. But it's just, I would say, we met anyone, I think that anyone who was visiting Africa at the time. There were very few visitors, but you'd run into them in the very remote places. There would be some professor from Ohio or things like that. So I think the thing of it was meeting so many people and just, every day the marvelousness of not knowing what you're going to see. Yes. You could be on a road, you never know what you're going to see, an elephant or a giraffe or what. It's always a big surprise. And the other thing that was so great, just in general, this was before the end of colonization by the European countries. That is, Belgium was no longer was still controlling the Congo, and England was controlling East Africa and so on. And the Portuguese were controlling Angola. And so we only traveled alone as a Land Rover from country to country. I never had any fear at all. It was amazing. When you think of today, we didn't have a gun or anything because we were such serious conservationists. We didn't want to even shoot a bird. So we ate a lot of canned food when we weren't in the home of a warden. That was fun. Whenever we met one of the wardens or just farmers or anyone, they always wanted you to be there for dinner. So that was very special too. I see, we met the Africans. If we were going somewhere, there weren't that many roads marked, and there weren't many roads, period. So you could either have just a track or an animal path, or ruts from a previous car. Sometimes you weren't sure which direction to go. And if we just asked one of the Africans, we knew a few words. Iko Wabi, I know was where, but I don't remember many. They would just get on the car, on the hood, and say, "Oh, I'll show you." And we'd go 50 miles, and then they have to walk back. But everyone was very friendly and welcoming then. And that's why I think it's so special for people to know. At one time, it was wonderful as far as traveling and meeting people. And, of course, seeing all the great animals every day, and the excitement of not knowing what you're going to see.
Did you return to California after that trip?
Pardon?
Did you return directly to California after that trip?
Oh, no, because on the last day of this journey or expedition, as we call it, we were on our way to Addis Ababa, where we were going to meet a freighter, and we were going to go on this freighter around to Japan and the East, and then to San Francisco. It was going to be 2 or 3 months, I think, or 2 months anyway. And there on that ship, we were going to write George was keeping a draft. We were going to write the draft of the book. So when we got to New York, we could just finish it up. But on the way, we left Nairobi, we were in the plane. He wanted to stop in Somaliland to see one more antelope because he wanted to see as many as he could. In the plane, he started having bad headaches. And when we landed, he was paralyzed from the waist down. It was just like that. It was the most awful thing. And in Somaliland, there was no hospital. There was just it was like a little shack for pregnant African women, and only one English doctor. He thought George must have brucellosis or something else, from drinking blood from the Maasai. Well, we never drank blood from the Maasai, but anyway, it was terrible. It's a long story to tell, but we were there about a week while he was getting worse and worse. And during that week, this little area only had that little hospital. It wasn't really a hospital, it was sort of a shack. And they had a post office, and they had a Catholic church. That was it. So I spent that week wiring every embassy around that area, saying, help, SOS, we're stuck here. We want to get back to Nairobi. And after about the fourth day, all of a sudden, I had to stay at a guest house, and I was crossing the creek to get to my husband, and they were wheeling him out on a gurney, and he said, Jeanie, where are they taking me? And it turned out an RAF pilot landed his plane and is going to take us to Nairobi against his officers, against his rules. He wasn't supposed to do that. Wow. So they took us back to Nairobi, where it was a real city and real hospitals, and I think it was one of the hospital was for the incurables or something like that. Mm-hmm. So that was the end of the journey and the beginning of this big hospital episode for years. But
in Africa?
No, we were in Nairobi at least 3 months or longer, because they finally were thinking that maybe he had polio. In fact, they had polio, but he kept having this terrible pain, and they said, well, you're not supposed to have pain for polio, and they kept calling him chicken and everything like that. But he kept getting worse. After 3 months, the March of Dimes, they used to call it, yes. Everybody donated dimes, was one of their duties was to bring people back who were overseas who had polio back to New York. And so Dr. Osborne, who sent us to Africa, he was the president of New York Neurological Society, contacted the head of the infantile paralysis, I forgot, and arranged for George to be taken back. And so that was with a stop in between at Frankfurt. He was very, very ill. He was down to about 98 pounds. And so when we were in Nairobi, everyone would say, oh, when you get to the United States, you're going to have the best therapy, and you're going to have pools, and he'll get better for sure. But when we arrived, and George was flown from Frankfurt and met at New Jersey or somewhere, we actually ended up in the Mount Sinai. It was center for the Mount Sinai Hospital on Fifth Avenue in New York City, yes. And into a polio ward with I don't know if you've seen the polio ward, but it had about 25 people in iron lungs. Mm-hmm. It was so depressing. George was lucky. They always said he was lucky because he only had it from the waist down. So he was one of the only persons there that was lucky. There was one other young man also named George, and he didn't have to be in the lung either, but he wore a big something on his chest all the time. So he ended up in that ward. And then we were there a long time. Maybe a year. It's very depressing. They were all very young people and iron lungs.
What did you do while he was hospitalized?
So what happened, when we came back to New York City, and I didn't know anyone there, or really, except the Audubon Society. I had worked for them at the Sugar Bowl in California, and the president, and I know his name so well, and all of a sudden that's going to escape me. Sometimes that happens. The president of the National Audubon Society lived on Madison, and they offered to let me stay with them for about 3 weeks until I could find a place to live. So that was really great, because I wasn't too far. But then I was supposed to move and find a place, and I thought, this sounds so naive, you won't even believe it. I thought, since the hospital is on Fifth Avenue, and it's at 100th Street, so the front of it is on Fifth Avenue, but the back of it is on Harlem. And I thought, I want to be safe, and how can I be close to the hospital? So I decided to go into and ask every doorman, starting from about 80th Street all the way down, or even closer than that, to 60th. I thought, I went into every, there's doorman outside of every hotel. I went to ask every one of them if they could possibly find that there's a small little place in their apartment for me, telling about my circumstances. And after so many, I found one, and he said, "Oh, the owner actually has a daughter with polio. Maybe he'll help you." And so I went down to Wall Street and found his office, and he said he would give it to me as long as I didn't ask for anything. It was like a workman's closet. It was bigger than a closet. It had a little kitchen and a little bathroom, and he said he'd give it to me. I've forgotten, it was like $125, and it's just amazing. So I was able to be at the hospital and stay with George until midnight, and then walk home. It was only about five hotels, and I did. So I could live in without fear. I was such a scaredy cat about going on the subway. I usually avoided the subway and took the bus if I had to do that. That's how I lived. And so we were there after he was in the hospital over a year or something. There's a whole things to tell. We go on forever, from being in the polio ward, and then he had to, gradually go from. But we're trying to figure out why he kept having this terrible pain, and so we had this one doctor named Dr. Sweet, and we didn't like him at the first because he said to George, he better prepare to spend the rest of his life in bed. And so they decided she would try to have some surgery. Perhaps there was something obstructing his bones or spine. So they decided they were going to have the surgery. And during the surgery, his heart stopped. And they had to ring the bell, and someone ran to his chest, and George remembers them ripping open his chest and massaging him, and brought him to his heart back and saved his life. And so that caused a lot of bleeding. This caused another delay, because now he's going to have to get over this. So all this time he's not having any therapy. what I was going to say as the next thing is, just a second. After that, because so the surgery was not done because he failed his, he was too weak and they couldn't continue it. So then this Dr. Sweet decided something else to stop the pain. He put him in an all full body cast with his arms spread outside and his legs spread out like he was on the cross with a cast. So you could actually, there was a handle in the stomach, you could pick him up and turn him over. And miraculously this stopped the pain. So he figured out that's the immobilization. But in the meantime, he was trying a barrage of various drugs. And finally one worked. And so then now we started the rehabilitation from all that. So his rehabilitation was delayed. But he was fortunate at the end. I mean, we could keep going. There were many other things happened. But he ended up, he could walk with crutches because one of his knees connected. So he after many other things, he spent his life walking with Canadian crutches. And what made him happy was that now he could still go on trains and planes, because his main idea in life, his main thing was traveling, because he's a geographer. He's been everywhere. And he taught at San Francisco State University and was considered one of the best speakers because he'd been everywhere. He liked to travel. And he was this big storyteller. But the whole medical thing has been terrible. Yeah.
So that, so after New York, you guys came back to California and he
No.
started, oh, yeah.
So when George was getting out of the hospital, and for a while, they were letting him out on, you could go out on Sundays for half a day. And that was a great thing. You can't believe, well, it was such a miserable place to be in the hospital. On Sundays, when he's in a wheelchair, I could wheel him to a taxi and we'd go to the opera. And so the manager of the opera arranged for us to be right by the stage. And we happened to be in New York at the time of the great prima donnas and were singing, the Tibaldi and Risa Stevens, all of them. So it was like going, two big things. You're in the hospital there, it's great. So, but we didn't know to California. What happened was, so he started getting out of the hospital, and Dr. Osborne, who had sent us to Africa, decided to, he renovated a room in the Onion in the Lion House of the Bronx Zoo, and he renovated it and made it a complete office for us so we could go there and finish the book. So it had leather seats and all the files and everything. So we started working there, and we're going to finish the book finally. Then the International Union for the Protection of Nature, it was called Conservation and Protection of Nature and Natural Resources, was in Brussels. And they wanted to hire George to go to Brussels and be the staff ecologist. And in retrospect, she should have said no, and then we'd have finished the book, right? But instead, they told Dr. Osborne that he'd only have to work half a day and he could work on the book the other half. Well, that never happened. They didn't have any staff, and they never had any money. But we went. So there's one of those milestones, you know. And so George was a staff ecologist, and I wasn't supposed to work, but they didn't have any staff for him, so I ended up having to work there too. So we were there. Of course, Switzerland, what happened was the office was in Brussels, and you wouldn't believe it. It was in the basement of the Natural History Museum, which was like 200 or 300 years old, I think. And it sounds like a terrible thing to say, but one of the reasons we've said we had to move it to another country is to go to the restroom in the basement, you had to walk through the pissoir to go to the office. And they thought that was normal and okay. And we thought it was terrible. So anyway, when we reported that, I think in the meantime, the union board of directors had decided they were going to move out of Brussels anyway, and they wanted to take it to Switzerland. So after we were there 6 months or something, George and I drove to Switzerland, and we were supposed to get find a new office for the International Union, which we found. And we also found a beautiful place for us to live right on the lake. So that's when we went there. So we were there over a year, I think, like that. And then we also helped with some of the international meetings, which were in Warsaw and some other places. So it's really great, though. The board of directors were really well-known and famous people from every country. Mm-hmm. So when we lived in Switzerland, we rented this lovely little house on the lake, which is 2 bedrooms upstairs. And so we became kind of the headquarters for the union until we found the new place, and they could move everything from Brussels to here. So it was really a really wonderful year for us. And I guess after that, we started to come home because it was there. And when we got home, George still didn't have a job, of course, now. So he still was on crutches. And so it took 2 or 3 years for him to try to find a job and to get settled. We tried many things. Yeah.
And how about yourself? When did you start to work sort of outside of the context of your guys' kind of work together? Did you start working separately at a certain point, you?
Well, where were we ending after Africa? We came home. Yeah, I had to work because we didn't have any income.
Yeah.
The deal with the trip to Africa was solely expenses. Mm. There was no any of the money, just expenses. We didn't even have insurance, so I had to work. So when we first got home, we lived in a little guest house behind my mother's house in Redwood City, and I'm always looking at want ads. And George couldn't go to work yet at all, and I found a want ad working for an artist in Woodside, not far from our place. So I started. That's one of the first jobs I got. I started working for him. His name was Walter Keane. Not a great artist, but it was a job that was kind of interesting, managing his art and the sales and everything. It was just an all-around management job. I quit one day because I'd been there over a year, because it was when John Kennedy died, and everybody was staying home there was a big, if it was either the funeral or the National Day honoring John Kennedy. And he told I had 5 high school girls working for me at the time, and they all had gone to work. I stayed home, and he told them that I was lazy. I quit. I said, he said, who is he? Yeah. Thinking he's better than John Kennedy. Yeah. So that was that job. And other jobs, that what I did then, because I still needed money, is, from high school, I was a good typist. So I rented an IBM typewriter, and I put an ad in the Stamford Daily, and I said I would do typing. I was doing 50 cents an hour, Everybody else was charging $35, but I said I was a very good editor and speller, and I charged 50 cents. But so that's what I did, because we were able to always. I'm looking at one ads. I found a house in Atherton. It's on the property of a mansion. We were able to rent this little house for $175 if we didn't, and they gave it to us for 1 month so that we could paint it. It was an old house. Apparently in the early days, all the people from San Francisco used to have hunting lodges in Woodside or Atherton, and this was one of those. They couldn't sell it because it was less than an acre. And so we moved there, and that was 170. So in order to pay for that, I had the typing these dissertations, which is really kind of hard because everybody wanted them. It was always Christmas or Easter, and they always wanted them in a hurry. Right. I didn't take math because that was very time-consuming. Yes. So I took most of the other things, and most of the ones that came to me had already had somebody else do them. But they hadn't followed the Turabian model of the standards for Stanford. They were rejected, right? And so I got most of those. But so that seemed a lot of work for that. Anyway, that's how we survived through that period. And when my son was born, Carl, we took him home to that little place in Atherton. It was on Tuscaloosa Avenue. So we're up to that point. So I've always had to be, from the time I was very little, I always liked working. Even when I was about 9, I started cooking for the lady next door for dinners. And the thing I always remember, because she liked her tomatoes peeled, so you knew how to learn how to put them in the hot water and peel them and all. She was an old Victorian lady. And then very sweet. And then in high school, before I also worked after her, I worked in a jewelry shop, and I always wanted to be the one to show people everything, but no, I only had to wrap packages. And then I had a problem with that because they were the Reinhardts, and they were refugees who had just come from Germany. The thing was, this may be too silly for the interview, but so the job was wrapping packages. So she liked me to have the double string. You doubled the amount you needed, and took it across and tied the bow. And then when the husband saw that, he was furious. That was too wasting. So it's always things like that. I worked for them. I forgot some other ones in that, but the one I had mostly in high school, I worked for the 3 whole years, every after school, summer, and what else? That's all there is after school. So all the holidays. A San Mateo County Title Company in Redwood City. It was right next to the courthouse of Redwood City. And that was really great because as I was in that commercial training in Sequoia, I knew how to do everything. And so I was always taking, especially in the summer, but even after school, I was taking the place of anyone who was absent. So you could do one day typing deeds of trust, another day, proofreading, another day working with the president, another day doing. So that was really fun. I did that 3 years until I graduated. And that's why at those days, also worked at the desk where all the deals were coming, real estate deals coming in from Woodside. And the acres then were $1,000 an acre. And I wanted my dad to buy one, but he couldn't do that. That's why I always wanted to buy a house in Woodside. I finally have a little one there.
Well, could you tell us a little bit about just the story of how you came to work at PARC. I think you joined PARC in
Oh, yes.
74, was it?
Right.
Yeah.
That's really something because, all right, so we had to come home. And where were we? We got in the little house in Atherton. And through some a real quirk, it's something that couldn't have happened to you. We didn't have any money, as you know, and we didn't have any bank account or anything. But I always my experience, I always wanted a house in Woodside, or loved being in that area. So when we were living in Atherton, we used to take rides going around to Woodside. And even earlier in my life, my dad was a great gardener. We used to go up to Woodside all the time, and he would gather leaf bulb to bring home for the garden. There were no fences very much. But anyway, wait, where was I right there? I was just telling you about, what was I selling them?
Well, we were trying to talk about how you got to PARC, and you were saying that, you had been living in Atherton, but wanted to live in Woodside.
On that. Oh, so I liked always driving around Woodside. And this one day I saw an ad, like I'm always looking at ads, and it said this charming rustic house, dream house, little rustic dream house. And so we were going to go out for a ride, and then we stopped at this little rustic dream house, and Carl was 2 years old. And so we were walking around the whole house, and there's an old couple were retiring, moving out. And we were there quite a while, and then this woman said she wanted us to have that house. She thought we were such a darling couple. I said, well, we don't have any money. Oh, she said, that's not a problem. I'll loan you the $10,000 for the down payment. We said, okay, but, we would have to try to get a loan. So she said, that's okay. She'll wait. And it turns out that, that's amazing, isn't it? It is. And when we were there, someone was in the garden working with concrete, and she had him carve in the concrete 67, I think that was the date, and Carl. She said, I know. So she just loved us. And having all this going on. Oh, so it turned out that George wasn't working, but he had people calling him and wanting him to give lectures, and he could get $100 now and then for giving a lecture. And he was at some symposium. He happened to sit next to president of, it was called American Western Title Company or something like that. I think they're not Western Title. And so during the symposium, they were having a lot of fun talking. And at the end, I forgot the president's name. He said, George, if you ever need anything, call me up, I know. So after we met this lady, and George said, well, he's going to call him up. Because we tried to get a loan from Bank of America, and they said, no way. We had nothing. And so he calls him up, and he said, George, that's not a problem. And so that's how we got a loan. Can you believe it? And we, so naive, we didn't ask about the interest or the loan or anything. We just got it. And that's how we got our house, which in those days was like $62,000, which was a fortune because I think my mother's house was $33,000. Right. We never even told them how much it was. But it was a big struggle for us for 10 years because he started getting not even half-time, but a few hours of lecturing at San Francisco State. We'd only get about $600 a month, and the mortgage was like $400. And so I was trying to pick it up, other ones, to typing. Yes. It was just a struggle. 10 years, I think, until we had a little. And then the woman at first said she was charging no interest on the $10,000 at all. We could pay it someday. But when she died, then her heirs wanted me to pay right away. So we had to try to come up with something. We made a deal for $500 a month or something. Anyway, it was hard. And what we were going to do after that. We were talking about the house. Oh, yeah, so that was really, really nice, and we moved in. And about more working, why I have to do that. So now, of course, we need money. So years have gone by, so I decided, well, I better try to go back to teaching. I didn't want to leave my son. I really wish I could have stayed home, because I think when we started working, he was either maybe 7 or 9, something. But we were struggling. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to work, but I want to be paid for my value. I have the degrees. I went to Africa, and this and that, and I'm not going to get less than $1,000 a month. But everywhere you went, they were all 800, 600, 500. They wanted you to work for nothing. A lot of them were 600. And so I finally ended up with, in the meantime, before I did this, I worked on, these temporary secretarial. As I worked for SRI, I worked for all the different Silicon Valley companies already, where you just went and everybody wanted to hire me, but I didn't, it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I ended up with 3. One was going to be Dr. Gerasi at Stanford. He was a famous chemist. Yeah, sure. And, but they wouldn't come up very high either. They were at 800 stellars, less than that. And then the second highest, it was the department store, which doesn't exist anymore. And I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. It was a big one like Macy's, but it's gone. And the CEO, with whom I interviewed, he was such a handsome man, and he wore a beautiful, like a naval jacket. And that would have been okay, being a secretary, but you had to work for the controller, and the controller had a silly little office in the back. I said, no way am I going to spend my life in there. Yeah. And so the third one was Xerox. And they were going to go not as high as 1,000, but it was pretty close, maybe 9 or 875, or at least anyway. But also, I preferred it because it had. I said I wanted something to do with education or learning or something like that. I didn't want to just be secretary. I've done that, done typing and all that. And anyway, I felt I was a professional. I didn't want to do secretarial. And so I went there for an interview. Guess what? The interview was in a beanbag room on the floor with people all on the floor, a lot of them. And I thought, we were a few years from Switzerland, but we had been living in the European, and so everything was more formal and very nice. And you go in the beanbag room, and here there are people with no shoes on. Some of the women had no bras, and everybody's just sitting around, lying in the beanbags. I thought if my mother saw that, she would have said, "You better not do that." Anyway, they asked a lot of questions and everything, and I guess I got the job. So that's what happened. That was really something. The whole environment. As it was, I think that's what the corporations saw. They saw people in administration on the 3rd floor were always dressed up, but and the people on the 1st floor were the chemists. They were dressed up, and then here's on the middle, very informal people. And so I was first hired into the media conversion group. Mike Wilmer was the head of that. And was that part of the systems sciences laboratory? Which was media conversion? Was that on its own, or was it part of a larger group? No, it was just one of the groups. And it's the group that Lynn Conway was in.
Okay.
And I've forgotten some other of the well-known people. I can't think who else was in that right now. But, and that's when LRG had kept saying that they didn't need a secretary. But they always said I had to answer his phone and everything. As I told you, LRG said they didn't need a secretary. They do their own copying and all that. They didn't need it, but they needed one, in my view, because everybody wanted to find Alan.
Yeah.
And I always had to find Alan. I had to take all his phone calls, which he didn't want to take. And it's not that I didn't like him. I liked Alan a lot, but I thought it wasn't right for a group to say they don't use a secretary, but I'm doing this work for them.
Yeah.
So that's why the very first thing I did was recommend to Bert, when he got here a year after me, that LRG needs a secretary. And that's when they hired Carla Garcia. And then Carla became, as I told you later, Dave Robeson came in, and then they're married after now. Yeah.
Well, could you talk a little bit about what that first year was like? What was it? I guess my question about that first year was, PARC had this aim toward building the office of the future.
Yes.
And, there you are coming in as a secretary or an office administrator just a few years after the place opened.
Right.
And so I was wondering, what was PARC like as an office? Were you using sort of established office technologies like typewriters and things? Or were you expected to use the computer technologies that they were developing at PARC?
Yeah. Well, when I started, so it was a year before Bert, as I told you, if you can check it up on that article that he and I wrote called our first 6 years at PARC. And so I described that the thing that we had to do when I first arrived, we didn't have an Alto, and we weren't using a typewriter. We had some kind of a type. We used like a TI terminal. That's what we had, and you had to use that. There was no screen, and so we used something called Poet. I think it was. When you typed in, you had to say .skip1 for a paragraph or .skip2. It was a code that we did. And then when you had all that, then you couldn't see it, of course. Then if you wanted to see it, you had to do another application called Pub, and that translated those codes into the print. And then we ran to the printer, which was called the XGP printer. There's more steps in between. And the print came out on large rolls of paper. And that's it. And the whole building was using that one printer. At the beginning, we didn't have like the laser printer. I should read that one little part, but you refer to that. There were more steps. There were more steps involved in that. Excuse me. So, but also the other staff members, the computer scientists, really didn't want us doing it very much because there was a competition for using it. But I think so many of them all came at night. A lot of the guys slept there at night because then they could have full access to everything. But that process of the typing it on a TI and then getting it to the printer, there's 2 or 3 other things besides Poet and Pub. And I think anyone can read about it. I printed out that separate page for you on that. Maybe I could memorize it by now, but but I haven't.
Well, it's interesting that I think it's interesting that they were, by and large, discouraging the use of kind of established office technologies like typewriters and other systems like that. Was that something that was up for discussion when you joined, or they just said no?
We just whatever people were doing, that's what we started doing.
Yeah.
I don't remember that after that. It wasn't too long after that we got the altos. I don't remember, because when Bert came, he didn't experience that we had that. We were now seeing the screen when Bert came. So I don't know how long before me. This is all before me, where everybody was probably using this cumbersome system of trying to print and getting. But the big thing was when we got the screen, and when you got actual text on the screen. I guess even goes back to Ivan, I guess, with his graphics when he finally got it on the screen. But I don't remember anyone discouraging you or trying to get you to do a typewriter. We just did what came along.
Yeah.
And when there was something new to learn, we did it. So this couldn't have been too long, because when Bert came, this was passé.
Yeah.
And we now were working on an alto.
And so when you had the altos, let's say around 1975, were you using all the facilities like, Bravo for creating documents?
Yeah.
Were you using Laurel to do email? Was that a big part of it?
Yes, Laurel, and we used Bravo. I didn't use Sil very much, because that's very complicated for people that needed it.
Yeah.
I didn't use many of the other things. I remember we had fax on there too. I didn't use that, but we had it. But it was mostly all Bravo, I think. Mm-hmm. And there was markup that was kind of fun too. You could draw. Yes. That was William Newman's markup. But for me, my work was mostly with the Bravo and the messaging.
Yes.
Yeah. Most of mine of doing it was just collecting the information and making these manuals. So I didn't have to use everything, but I had to gather the material and to give it to other people.
Yes.
What I tried to do.
So could you talk about, once Bert Sutherland came in to direct the System Sciences Laboratory, could you talk about your roles as working with him for running the lab? Can you talk about the kind of the main things that you were working on?
Right. Yeah. So when he came out, I was just reporting to him. And I didn't have a group as other people did. I was like his assistant. And what he liked to do, he wanted me to be a part of what's going on. He didn't want me just to open the mail and hand it to him. He wanted me to open the mail, do whatever it says had to be done. If there was something, just tell him about. But it was something that I could reply to or do a draft for him. So what I would do is type it all up and have it ready for his signature. Mm. And so that's what he liked to do. So when he got it, if that was okay, he'd sign it, that was it. Otherwise, he would make some corrections or tell me what to do. So he liked to do that. So it gave me a lot of responsibility and knowledge of what was going on at the company. And he always wanted me I had his password, so he was away. He wanted me to handle things when he was gone, if I could, or let him know what was happening on that part. Then he asked me also, I was put in charge of working with the other, I don't know, we always call them either research administrators or people try to avoid this secretary thing, but yeah. working with them on the workloads, or like working on, we all had to take turns, like cleaning the cord run wires of the printers and assigning those things. And on any of these projects that I'm always recommending or promoting, working with them on that. We helped each other on if there were any special people coming or demonstrations to give. So I wasn't in charge of they had a manager, so I was just sort of coordinating any of these extra things that had to be done, or help if they come in new people. I helped train them, and I always helped if anyone needed any training. I did that, everything that I knew, or give it to the right people.
Well, on that point, could you talk a little bit about how some of the other non-research staff at PARC were reacting to this, to adopting these new technologies, like the software on the Alto? How was that? Did you have an easier time than most? It seems like you were very facile with it. You really figured things out. You documented how these things worked. Was it a struggle for some of the other people, or was it easy?
Yeah, I think it sounds like, remember, everyone was so excited about every new thing. So the thing is, when you went to the printer and you saw picked something there, somebody now had used bold. And now you had to go around and find out who did that and how you could do that. Mm-hmm. It seemed to me that all of the other administrators were so excited. Every time we got something new, we got a new font. Now there's italic. Oh, now there's color. Dick Schaub got color. It seemed everyone was very excited about that. All of this was happening. And now they all had their own Alto. And how easy it all was, because people all came from the traditional office, and here it was. And so there weren't that many people that, I think that when I came, maybe there were 2 other people. But CSL also had, they had 2 people, two administrators that had been there. Susan Jerome, who was the one who, I don't remember how it started, but she wrote the manual for Bravo with Charles Simonier. And Adrienne Payne, I think she was Bob Taylor's secretary. They all seemed, we didn't talk a lot, or I didn't know all they did, but they were the ones that kept CSL going, mm-hmm. mainly, that I remember. But as I recall, everyone was just very keen on the new thing. Yeah. And now we have, it's so easy, the new font. So try a new font, try a new, if you hear about some new thing, what else would be I don't know, I guess if somebody needed to use something for their manager, they would learn it, whether it was SIL or markup or whatever. But I think, basically there's a lot of just, I think the computer scientists did a lot of their own papers too, Yeah. I think that they were used to it. So there was no such thing as, I think, dictating or none of that old traditional stuff. And what the other thing you remember has not to do with the typing, but I learned a lot there because I come from the old school of, I was older, I was always older than everybody. Hear them say, nobody's going to ever ask an administrator at PARC to get a coffee, I'll tell you that. Because you would hear people say, get off my back. I mean, people were very forward, and I thought, whoa, I could do that. Because my husband, even when he was crippled, he was only teaching, even when he got a full-time job, he was only teaching like 2 hours a week or 4 hours a week. And then still go home and he'd say, I didn't have any socks today. I remember I said one day, well, get off my back. That's what I learned at PARC from the women. Because for me, I was going like to women's lib.
Yeah.
That's what, for me, it was like a whole shock at Xerox compared to my life in Europe and everything.
Right.
Yeah. But I found nothing but the enthusiasm and everyone realizing that it's so great and thinking about the future for schools and everything, you know. I can't see any other negative points that people would have about it. I would just think that sometimes everyone would have liked more help. I think you had to do a lot on your own.
Yeah.
And as I say, there were 5 of the staff were really helpful. One was like Dan Swinehart was, and Larry Macinter, and Larry Tesler, Charles Simoni when he was there, and Ralph Kimball. And so you could go to them and they would show you how you could get one of these new things, or take time to teach you. So I think in that respect, that was hard for people, because you couldn't go and ask Boggs or Thacker or none of those people to show you how to do something like that, where the other ones would.
You came to learn who was more open to helping.
They were more interested in the user.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and the other ones were all very up in the air, you know, the scientific, you know, Thacker, Metcalf, all of those other ones. But these 5 are the ones that you could go to.
That's really interesting.
Particularly.
Especially Larry Tesler. I mean, you know, what he did to go on to be so involved with the, you know, user interface in general, you know, is just so...
Oh, yes, right.
It's an interesting connection.
Yeah. And I'm sure I always think about Ron Ryder a lot and Doug Fairburn and people that were always seemed to be doing a little of everything.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I was trying to keep it straight with Ron Ryder, did a lot on the laser printer, but so did Starkweather. And yeah, I think some of them worked together.
Sure.
And they were always so excited about things. So I think we were too.
Well, you had a very much, I guess, even more than a front row seat to Bert Sutherland's kind of approach and process as a research manager.
Yes.
And I just wondered if you could, you know, characterize how he approached what I think is a very difficult task of trying to orchestrate what all these researchers were up to.
I know. I always saw that was his main thing of management of brilliant people. And I remember him always said that when you have to manage with a loose rein. And that meant, you know, they have all these ideas and they want to do all these things, and you can't just hold them, don't let them do everything. You have to have a loose rein. He talked about that. And I think he was always looking to lift people up. I know when he got there and then he saw Lynn Conway, she was very quiet all the time. You never heard about Lynn until Bert got there, and then he kind of disbanded in a way, Mike Wilmer's group, and Lynn became the head of that. And there's so many of the people that had been in groups still went with her. We'd have to go back and look at the time chart. But he was always bringing in something new, and always thinking something that will help the company. And so at the same time, trying to let people develop things, but you have to keep in mind that does it help the company? He always said, "What have you done for us lately?" That the company would say to us, "What have you done for us lately?" And always looking for something new, like when he brought in John Brown. So he had to be very careful. When he brought in somebody, he learned he had to make sure always to have the head count, and then he had to get the corporation to agree in advance to give him so many people, the budget and so many people. I think I saw on a paper that when he brought in John, he got the head count for John, and then he got 7 head count. So it doesn't do any good to just bring in somebody if you didn't have the head count to let them start doing something.
Right.
So I think that was a big part of the management too. You have to think of the budget and the head count and all that business. And I think one of his biggest asset, it was so easy for him to explain the most difficult things. And so when he would give talks, he always seemed to clarify whatever the subject was so that people really understood what he was talking about.
Could you talk about some of the researchers specifically in that system sciences laboratory that really made like the largest impressions on you?
Oh, yeah, right. Well, I guess, people I always think about Ron Ryder, I always said seemed to always be with other people building things together, as I recall. And then when I think of him with the laser printer, and also a very friendly person and very supportive and all that. It was Charles. I always liked Charles very much when he was there. He was very amusing and so smart, and I liked working with him when he asked me to help try to break Bravo. And yeah, that was fun to work on. And I liked working with George White when he was developing voice recognition. And as I told you, in order to give demonstrations, he would have me sitting behind some type of a barricade, and the gifts would be in front of it, and as he dictated, the words would appear on the screen, and it was really quite a wonderful thing for people to see. George was also in Lynn Conway's group, I believe, and there were some other people. And as I say, Larry Tesler I always liked because he was so helpful and all that. I used to see him a long time ago. I used to see him at my grocery store quite a lot, but I don't know what happened to him. I haven't seen him lately. So as I say,
Unfortunately, he passed away a few years. Unfortunately, he died a few years ago.
Yeah, I didn't keep track with him, and I haven't been at the museum for a while. It's keeping track of him. Yeah. And I thought I was always the oldest person at the lab, but it turns out I wasn't. There were some other people who were not too far behind me. I think Danny Bravo wasn't too far behind me.
That would make sense.
And
yeah.
But I always was probably 15 years or 20 more than anybody. What are some other ones? That's the ones I think I told you. Larry Massinter. Always remember him because of that quotation I told you about, because I thought, wow, he was so brave because of all the people in the lab. Everyone was talking about that, but he was really, really brave about that. Oh, Adele Goldberg. Adele was always she was very active. She and with Alan, she always was working on all of her projects, and also I think with the small talk, and I don't know, sometimes I think with the children too. Mm-hmm. But she was a very lively person, very smart. I'd like to have her around. The only thing I always had this question, I think I mentioned that her secretary was Janet Moreland, and Adele asked Janet to learn shorthand, which I thought was very strange and passé. But Adele had seen me using shorthand when I was taking notes, and I think she thought it was a great thing for her admin to do. That was it. And Lynn Conway, I really liked Lynn. She, one thing about Lynn, she didn't like to go to dealer. His dealer was very hard. The people were very open and kind of crass, I think, and critical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was kind of scared, but not too much, but Lynn didn't like to go, I know. I think at first, I don't think people respected her when she got there, but she showed them how she was. And then Bert arranged for her. That was where Bert was always doing this with people. He arranged for her to go to MIT and teach them her new system. And so he was always doing this for people. And the thing about Lynn is amazing. When people in general were not using Bravo and SIL and markup and all those things. But when Lynn wrote her book, she did all of the whole book, all the formatting, all the typing, herself, using every one of these new applications. That's quite a feat. I don't know if everybody realized that.
Yeah, that is amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing that she did that. And was there something about that was always astonishing? The other thing I remember about Lynn, because if I had to, when I took him at any messages on the phone, she would not take a phone call unless you had found out the name, the person, what they want, before she would answer it. Because then she would always be prepared.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what I remember about her on the phone. And of course, the thing that I remember about Alan most is that he didn't want to talk to anybody, but that he gave me this tiny little piece of paper with the names of the people he would talk to: Dr. Paik, Ivan Sutherland, Bert Sutherland, and his girlfriend. And that was a very serious thing. Yeah. But he was fun. As I say, he thought everybody could learn small talk. As you know, every child, everyone, all the research secretaries. And so he actually gave a class for us for several days. So we all got the experience of trying to use small talk. And that was very great. He was very inclusive. And at other times we got to watch the children playing with the turtle too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he was really he was just a lot of fun. Not everybody is fun.
Well, I won't ask you who the people who weren't fun are. But I did want to ask you about, you mentioned dealer, which I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, was a kind of a meeting that was organized by the Computer Sciences Laboratory?
Yeah, that was Bob Taylor's
group.
Yeah.
Well, I was just interested if there was like a difference in the work culture, in your impression, between how things were going on in the Computer Sciences Laboratory and how things were in the kind of work culture in your System Sciences Laboratory. Did you perceive a difference there?
I don't know. I think they were just totally separate. I think, as you say, the CSL had all their big meetings, I don't know how frequently, on dealer. I think that's probably when they discussed all their issues and, I suppose, any new development or ideas or criticisms. And then I think we had we'd had our meetings in the beanbag room, it was called. And ours also were sort of bringing people up to date. I didn't really attend too many dealers. You could attend; they weren't secret or anything. Yeah. But the ones for SSL as I say, were sort of getting together was kind of fun. As I said, I used to stop at the bakery and bring in a huge tray of eclairs and cream puffs, and everybody came on time, so they would get their favorite thing. And there were reports. I don't remember any of these cruelty or sharp things. There was a different atmosphere, I'd say. I think maybe in CSL they were used to just being tougher, or maybe because Bob Taylor was kind of that way, I think. He's kind of maybe abrupt or something. It always seems that that they think I think I had the feeling that they felt superior to our lab for some reason. Yeah. And I don't know why. Except Bob Taylor just made them feel more superior. Yeah, because he's the first one getting the altos, you know. Yeah. He at one time actually asked to get Bert Sutherland's office. And I said, Bert, you can't let him take your office. You know, he would have taken everything if he wanted to. He wasn't a cooperative person for the lab, for the whole building. He was Bert was interested in PARC as a whole. CSL seemed to be mostly interested in CSL in the limelight. So in that respect, if their work structure is different, I don't know. They did have some very big names, you know, Bogger and Thacht, and they were the big, I would say, like you'd say, big shots because of the work they were doing, I think. And maybe some of the people we had just weren't as in your face as other people. I don't know. Yeah. You never heard Ron Ryder or Sacker people or Starkwood, or you never heard any bragging or anything like that. I don't know. Well, it was the impression I had anyway.
Yes, yeah. Well, I want to get another one of your impressions, if I could, which is just about, you know, talking about PARC as a whole.
Yes.
And Bert being concerned with PARC as a whole.
Right, he's always been the big cooperator. I think to his demise, maybe, he was so cooperative, everyone. And it probably didn't stick up enough for himself, maybe sometimes.
What was your impression of the top management of PARC? You know, of the. Did you think that it was kind of well led and well managed? What was your kind of impressions of the top management?
Mostly it was with Dr. Paik. We didn't see too much of him. He's always very nice. He doesn't ever come to any of our meetings that I recall. You just run into him in the hall or something. We saw memos. We didn't see any big pronouncements about anything, except for him. Frank Squires was the HR person, and he's always seemed to be just a nice, friendly guy. But people didn't seem to complain about him. He seemed like okay person in general, because he's HR, you know. Yeah. The only person I always saw not a really totally negative feeling about, but Dr. Paik's assistant, Gloria Warner, she was very abrupt and very. She wasn't supportive of the support staff, the research administrators. I think she felt very above everything like that. And even why I feel that, at one point, Dr. Paik was going somewhere, and he asked Bert Sutherland to be the interim director while he was gone. And I'm Bert's assistant, and so I wasn't going to be able to go there with him, but we were going to have his phones come to me so I could answer. I'm his assistant. But she wouldn't go for that. She changed his directives. So she wanted only not to have me involved at all while he's director. So I think a lot of things might have gone on then that I don't know about. I thought that was really bad. Bert allowed that. He shouldn't have allowed that, I think. But she wanted to keep his phone calls, and I was not in it at all.
Yeah.
So I thought there was some politics going on. There are things that I didn't know about. Anyone else in management? I can't think of anyone. The facilities people, the purchasing people, they all were really competent, I think, and great. I don't remember any big problems with any of the others. Again, when Harold Hall was director, as I say, I don't know too much about him except some of the memos that he sent to he and Bert Sutherland.
Well, I had kind of a final question about PARC, which was when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that at the time while you were working at PARC, and you were there until 82, I believe, that you and the other people there, the non-research staff, the research staff alike, had the sense that what was happening there at PARC was really exciting and important. And I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit. You know, how did that come out, or how did that come through? You know, where... Can you just talk a little bit more about that feeling?
Yes, I think because all the time I was there from the very beginning, we talked about the Office of the Future. Everything was the Office of the Future. And every time there was a new development, it just added to that feeling that we were getting there. For example, thinking about it, we've had sometimes a meeting when everyone was talking about what it would be like, and we'd say, oh, well, as I say, someday we'll be at the beach and then call for a pizza, or someday we're going to be home at night and you feel that you need something, you'll call somebody and get it. And so it was all of this looking to the future and what would you like, how is that going to happen, and feeling that really is going to happen. And then you have the Dynabook that Alan talked about, and he said you're going to one day get the whole computer, right? The whole Encyclopedia Britannica, right, on the Dynabook. And so we kept thinking, it's like magic. We're just thinking of all the things you wish you had, that you would like it someday to bring. What are some other things you would like? I don't know, send you buy some tickets somehow, or have them come to you, maybe tickets to an event. So it was imagining having all these things that are happening today that would just do it for you. I think there was just all this excitement, and then people kept thinking, like when Doug Fairbairn flew to LA with his note taker, and then we heard from the corporation when they said there's no future in portable computing, and everyone is astonished. Or I guess when they do the demonstrations, even at these big events like Boca Raton, and you don't get a positive feeling from corporate, no one can understand that. And so I think everyone thought, wow, this is so wonderful stuff. And some of us would say, and for me, I would say how wonderful this will be in the classroom. All the teachers, I want to give every teacher one of our laser printers. Now they're going to do all their work for the class, just, their questionnaires or their tests, just press a button and everybody gets it. But it just wasn't going to happen. But we hoped it would.
Yeah.
Thought it was going to happen. And I thought at the end, too, when I was going to leave, or I was looking at things, thought we could maybe work with Xerox afterward. I said it'd be really fun selling these to schools and making sure they get into schools and things like that. You could think of that. But it's just such a shame, right, that it didn't happen. Yeah. And but for everyone else, I think it was exhilarating, and every day just seeing what's going to be the next new thing. We always had the next new thing to learn, right, or to find out how to do it. It was really, really great.
So could you talk a little bit about your departure from PARC in 1982 and joining Sutherland Sproul and Associates as assistant treasurer and office manager?
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. Right. So what happened was Bert was leaving, or he did leave, and so I was still there, and at the time. The corporation announced there was going to be early retirement program, and we had always mentioned perhaps if they started a company, maybe that someday I could join. If you said that not early, but at some point. Yeah. And so, in order to go to an early retirement, you had to be pretty close to age 50. And you had to have been there almost 10 years. So I was pretty close to both of those, so I decided to do that. And and so it was really very good. I think they were going to give you a whole year's or 6 months, a whole year, or a whole year. A whole year's salary for the year, right? Or the other way. Mm-hmm. Why am I getting mixed up? Anyway, you got half of the money for if you wanted to have it a year. Okay. So I took half the money for a year, I think. And they were really nice. They also gave you your health insurance forever, I got, and also a small, I didn't even know I was still getting it, a small amount of money, like a little pension. It's not really a pension. Mm-hmm. It was very generous, and then when you die, it's supposed to be $5,000. And so to this day, I'm still getting, would you believe, every month I get $500. I didn't even know I was getting that. It was a small little pension. I think it's astonishing that they've done that. Yeah. So anyway, I was able to join after Bert and Bob got it organized. I joined them as assistant treasurer. So what it meant is I was in charge of everything that goes with an office. I still have, we had to plan the office, buy all the furniture, whatever, and set up all the files, all that. And as far as the log, Ivan had already done another system of keeping a record. He called it his log. So every single item of any paper that left our office has a number. So from one all the way, every single thing, every letter, every purchase order, whatever it is. And that we started that. And this, setting up the phones and getting all the computers and all that. And then for the working, we actually had shared an office with venture capital firm called Advanced Venture Capital, right in Menlo Park. Okay. And they had, I've forgotten their names. There was two men and a secretary. And first, I think Bert and Ivan both became part of that venture capital group after a while. Right. Right. And so, of course, I answered all the phone. I thought I made them famous because I would just say hello. I always would say, Sutherland Sproul and Associates. It's funny, I think that makes a difference to people. And so I was connecting with everybody. Bob stays in Boston, and Ivan was in Pittsburgh, or was Bob also still in Pittsburgh? I think I'm forgetting now.
Yeah.
I think they were. That's the way it was. I know Ivan was in Pittsburgh. I think Bob was in Boston because Lee, his wife, was a professor also, and that's the thing. The company was Lee Sproul became president. Ivan, Bob, and Bert were vice presidents, and I was assistant treasurer. And I did all the accounting. And it's one thing, Ivan, besides always saying that he liked the Jeanie parties, the only thing he used to say about me that he thought was so great that whenever we were audited by the IRS, they never asked any further questions. I always passed it very well. And because whenever they came to our office, we gave them the whole office and access to all the files. And so I kept really good records and using the log and everything. So he was very proud of that. He'll still probably say that today. And that was a big deal. It's really good records in those days. And so we take care of the payroll. I used Bank of America payroll. Sometimes we had about 7 other people with us in other areas. The consulting, somebody on a consulting job, they're 6 months or something. So it wasn't a bad deal for me because I just had to give the bank the number of hours, and they did all no matter what state or anyway, they did it all. So it was pretty efficient. I answered all the mail, of course, and we didn't have too much contact with Ivan and Bob because they weren't there most of the time.
Right.
But I dealt with them, kept them informed of everything. And when they came out, of course, we were there. We were there for them. What else can I say? Oh, the other thing I did when I was there, I was trying to do, and they encouraged me to do some consulting. I was doing some consulting on office, not management, but the organization of the office. And I reorganized some offices for a few people, so set up all their files, and so they could find everything. I did a few of those. I did a little more, but we really needed more time just on regular things. Or I could have tried to find more clients probably, but I had plenty to do already.
Was the consulting job for Apple that involved, I think, both the Sutherlands and Bob Sproul? Was that like a particularly big contract, or was it unusual in that the 3 of them were involved?
That was the only big thing like that we had. It was, I think, 6 months. And I don't know, maybe they were just having them there and consulting them when they were there. And at the time, they were, as I said, I had to find housing for them. They were going to move out for those 6 months. Yeah. And I found Ivan a big house in Woodside, and Bob one in Palo Alto. And so they were there all the time. I didn't see them much because they were always going right to Apple.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of the really nice person that he worked with at Apple. And Alcorn, I think. Yeah. Alcorn, that's who it was. So that's amazing that I remember Al. He's a really nice person. So now I'm not sure what their job was. It was there. I didn't see many memos and things. I think it must have been more just having them there, it seems to me, and them learning too. They seem to enjoy it a lot. And then Bert didn't go there very much. He was doing the administration and all the other kinds of things you have to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Were there any other really major projects or contracts that stand out to you as having been really important to that story?
That we were doing?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Ivan, of course, keeps working on his asynchronous work on whatever he was doing. There probably were some small contracts, that I don't remember any other big ones. But there had to be other contracts. We had contracts, and in fact, we had contracts where Bert would set up the fee, and there were some of them where we were somehow collecting in advance because you had fees that were set up, contracts for certain months, and I can't remember what they were right now. I wasn't thinking of talking about Sutherland Sproul, but at any rate, I don't have anything. I didn't keep any of that because we had the log. Every single letter and every single thing that we ever did was in these. When they left, it was about 4 drawers of a steel case, and it went with Ivan. I think that originally we had them in storage, and then Ivan also had, I don't know if he was able to put them later on online, but the early part, that's we're talking the year, was it online then at all? No. No, that's right. So his it was all just plain paper, and there's a record of everything. And also Ivan has a lot of patents. I think he's always had some work going on patents. That's something that we didn't even bring up on. Well, we didn't do Sun yet, but
yeah. Well, let's talk about Sun. Could you tell us about how Sutherland Sproul and Associates became Sun Labs, and could you describe your new role there as program manager?
So there was some negotiating with Bert and Ivan, with Eric Schmidt, I think, started with. And so I wasn't in any of those, of course. So I know there were letters back and forth talking about doing that. And then I think they had to talk about what they're going to do with as far as patents and various proprietary issues on both sides. And they talked about, with Eric Schmidt, they talked about me. I think they wondered what I was going to do. And Bert told them, well, whatever comes up that has to be done, Jeanie will be eminently qualified, he said. So I don't know. So they took all of us. Who did we meet? We met with Wayne Rosing sometimes, and had a very nice secretary. So as we were beginning to think about it and beginning to go there, we had contacts with them. So when we finally decided to be there, we just showed up, I guess, and I don't remember what building it was, but the Sun was always having trouble with not enough space. But anyway, they found a conference room, and they gave us a conference room. Basically, it's going to be for Ivan, but that's where we made a little headquarters, where we started to just be in the building and start to get to know a little bit how things work. What I'm trying to remember, it's kind of faint for me, on how we finally we had our own building. We suddenly, because we only had part of the little while. We only needed for myself and Ivan and Bert. I think Bob was only going to be coming occasionally. And I know it's funny, isn't it? It's really funny that I just can't quite remember how we went from that room into our own building, Building 23.
One question I had was there already a collection of researchers there that became part of your organization, or was part of the project to hire in a bunch of new researchers to build the lab?
I know, even as I look back at the org charts, it's and I showed the earlier org charts, as I said, I think Sun had been planning to build a lab. They never got around to it, but there's early org charts that show at the top Eric Schmidt and Bill Joy and Scott McNeely and who would the other one have been? And Rain Rosing at the top of the line, and they showed a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so I think how it happened is because then another point, you saw Wayne Rosing becoming the director. Mm-hmm. So I think there were a whole lot of other people around. And I'm trying to remember how all of a sudden, when Bert took even the first org chart, there were still people on that org chart. Right. So I think what he had to do gradually is get to know them and get to know what they were doing, and then, being either changing or adding new ones, stopping projects, and starting projects. Yeah. I think is what had happened, because there were quite a lot of people on those org charts. And it's funny how it happens. This is so long ago, but it's very strange how I remember so many more details at PARC, even that's longer ago.
I think that's just how memory works. I think that's common to all of us.
But I know then once we are there, that's what Bert did, is looking at, always evaluating, always changing one. Moving people out of some groups, he would always find out who are the leaders and who are the ones that are going to make things happen, and add new projects or delete other projects. Right. That's how it seemed to go. And space was important, I guess, choosing the space. And usually in the PARC buildings, there are always these nice 4 big corner offices. And there was usually, at the very first one, there was Bill Joy, I think, and Wayne Rosing. And we had Bill Joy around a while, and Bert, and I've forgotten somebody else. And then because Bill Joy was what was he called? He was a corporate manager, I forgot what he was called. We got to see quite a bit of him. So it was just fun to watch it grow by, changing people, adding people. Mostly, I think he's always interested in the principal investigators. Mm-hmm. He would always choose a principal investigator and get them then to choose the staff members. Right. So I'm not always in those rooms, but that's what I believe he was doing.
Well, you were with Sun Labs for almost 20 years.
I know.
And I wanted to ask, what were some of the contributions that you made there of which you are the most proud? Mm-hmm.
Well, when we started, it was starting a new lab. So even though there were people that you say on that org chart, those were not lab, those were Sun people. Yeah. when we started the lab, Bert said, well, we need a publication, we need technical reports, so you have to start a technical report program. So my usual things is I always get together with staff, one of the staff members, computer scientists, or one of them, and I'm always a team person to do that. And then they said we need also the legal clearance process. I've got to do that, so we did that one. Writing the policy and all that. So we had that. We had the technical, the document system. That's like at Sutherland Sproul, we had the log, and we had to start a document system of keeping a record of all of the memos and everything that was done, and that I did with started with a person named Dick Silman, and because it was getting to be the internet thing. All the first documents were all paper, but later when it got to be Dick Silman, he's still around then we were able to put it online. That was later. Anyway, this person, Dick Silman, is still, today he has his own rock band, and you always hear about him all the time. Then when it was time for the web, I became the first webmaster for Sun Labs. I call him the Sun Master. And I was able to start the first home pages. And I always had high school interns working for me. And my high school interns were teaching other people how to do the home pages when it first started.
Right.
It was a big deal having the web come to town. Then I was always writing, teaching people about the processes. The other things then, I was in charge of facilities as far as, that's the first thing we did, and I was taught to do when you entered a new building, get a hold of all the closets, and that was a big deal. Just get a hold of them all and get the keys. So now we had storage. Otherwise, it would be very difficult. So there was facilities things, and I was in charge of all all those people used to all be ordering their office supplies separately, and then I brought it together to common. I was in charge then of doing that. Those facilities, they did a lot of facilities. Then at the beginning, I did quite a bit with space and helping assign people. The space is a big deal in the corporation, because it's all right. Some of the other things for which we're really not giving too credit for, but they were important to the people, was I was in charge of all the annual ball parties and annual picnics, which we always invited everybody, even their families. And those were important. Then there were all the, the different, at PARC it was learning all about all the applications. And at Sun it was just starting everything from scratch, because at PARC there were already processes.
Right.
So in that respect it was very different. Those were the big main ones. I also helped with we had the university intern program. I worked on that and with helping the computer scientists with the recruiting, and then when they got there, we had to give them their machines and space and the whole works and teach them where everything was. And then I also had a high school program. I always had about 5 high school students who came and worked after school. And I thought that was pretty nice for Sun to do. We worked with the school system. And what had happened is that they wanted to be able to work at Sun so they could put it on their resumes and do that. I told them I wouldn't hire anyone just for the summer. They have to come and work after school. And then they can work for summer too. But if they only came for summer, it didn't work out, because then they said they're going to work all summer, but they'd only work, it happened that the first week they were still on vacation, and then the last 2 weeks they had to go on vacation, so you ended up with no time.
Right.
So mine worked after school and summer, so some of them worked like 2 years straight. And one of them I had 3 years in high school, and then Son said he couldn't do that anymore, so they let him be hired in the 4 years in different departments at Sun. And he went from legal and engineering and this and that. And when he graduated, Sun hired him. He had become an engineer in the meantime. So that was really great. And so many of the young people were so grateful because they had good training. They learned what it was like to have a job and what you had to do. I had many parents thanking me a lot for that. And then, as I said, it's not a formal thing. It wasn't formal, but I did the parties and the picnics. And one thing, if you ask anyone from Sun, they probably won't even remember that I was in charge of technical reports or anything. They'll remember the bash. And that was this Friday night social thing I arranged every single Friday, without fail, 5 o'clock.
That was for the labs?
That was for the labs.
Yeah.
All of mine were just for the labs. It wasn't Sun.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't Sun, no.
Well, it seems like that bash bit was very important. Could you, for the people who went to it,
Yeah,
could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. I don't know how it started, but it just started right from the beginning. And it's 5 o'clock. And on my own time, on the morning before I got there, I would go to the store and buy. We had people from every country, especially the interns. And so I had to have different kinds of food. I'd always have, I could have salad, I have cold cuts, I'd have chicken, fruit and vegetables that you could eat. And just a little of everything, always desserts. And we even had wine and beer. Mostly wine. People didn't drink much. And so people came right at 5 o'clock, and they didn't have to say they were coming. It was just open. Mm-hmm. Not only to people in the lab, but anyone who's ever been at the labs who's at Sun. So we kept that going. They always felt welcome. As I'm going to say, some people planned their trips so they could be there for the best, like Whit Diffie. He always planned to get to the airport in time to get to the bash at 5. And learned more, he said, in 1 hour than he could all week, trying to see people. So it was valuable for the people who came. Interns who arrived if they got there on a Friday, they would be well known by Monday, the whole lab. So we'd always be like maybe 30 to 50, 60 people. So it's quite a lot of people. Those are the big ones, I guess. And so I was very busy, still with lots of paperwork on all these things. Yeah. And on the technical reports, I had a student who, she was my assistant. I'm still in touch with her today. She became an expert on creating indexes for books. That's what she's doing. And then on the web, I already had the students. I had 3 at the time, and so when we had access to start the web, right away they learned HTML, and they were teaching everyone how to do home pages more than me, because I always didn't have as much time as they did to do that. And so it was great having that extra help, because there was a lot of paperwork that we were doing, and filing, and things like that. Well,
I just wanted to, I think we've come up against the the limits of our studio time. So I just wanted to thank you so much for this interview. It was so fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for spending the time and doing it with us.
I hope that you learned the kind of things that you would like to know, because sometimes you don't know what people will think is the most important thing that you did. And it's just amazing how the time has gone so fast, too. And yet you have, even PARC, both of them stand out. But the thing is, we knew PARC was so great. And so in that respect, we think more of PARC, because at the end, after all our work, Sun fails, doesn't feel quite as good. But still, the experiences were very good. And my working with the staff, that's the other thing I would close with. If you work all this time with all these brilliant people, it's just such a different thing. And because when you meet, in general, the public and all the people around me, everyone seems kind of not exactly boring, but you want more.
Yeah.
You just want more.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we had. We had always excitement, always a new learning, even at Sun, always something new learning, something new excitement. I was very grateful for that. I really love that.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah. Well, thanks again.
Okay, you're quite welcome.